The next session is going to be on it's called a corporate conclave, and it's going to be on the theme of solar revolution, the new global norm. And I think you'd all agree one of the great triumphs of the last decade has been the rise of solar. In a way, it's not the rise, it's the fall, in the sense of the absolute plummeting trajectory of the costs of solar, which have been as dramatic as they are unexpected. Virtually nobody 10 years ago, not energy experts, not economists, not even energy entrepreneurs, nobody expected the rapidity of the fall that we've experienced. So to pull all that together, we've got a tremendous array, pun intended, of speakers to share their thoughts with you. I'll invite them up onto the stage. We have Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of TERI, Mr. Rana Kapoor, MD and CEO of Yes Bank and Chairman of the Yes Global Institute. We have Mr. Upendra Tripathy, who's the Interim Director General of the International Solar Alliance. And I believe we have Mr. Anand Kumar, though judging by the number of chairs, I suspect he's joining us in a little while. Oh, he's there, excuse me. So perhaps I have missed somebody out.
No, you haven't missed anybody out.
Right, we're all here. Present and correct. Splendid. In that case, Dr. Mathur, I invite you to give the inaugural address. Thank you.
As Martin mentioned, this spectacular fall in the prices of renewables have created this huge opportunity for us to actually start thinking of a transition to a renewables future. The decarbonization of the electricity sector is not just a gleam in the eye, it's not just a light at the end of the tunnel, it's a searchlight, a solar searchlight at the end of the tunnel. As we move towards this searchlight, the question becomes, how do we do it? How do we do it in India? How do we do it globally? How do we finance it? And it's a great pleasure that we have in this session, starting off with Mr. Tripathy, Mr. Anand Kumar, and Mr. Rana Kapoor, who would focus on issues related to building up the capacity in India, globally through the International Solar Alliance, and in financing it. In the second half of this conclave, there will be a range of corporate CEOs who would focus on the kinds of opportunities that they see in this sector. Without further ado, let me request Mr. Rana Kapoor to share his thoughts on the growth of the solar industry in India and internationally. Mr. Rana Kapoor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, TERI, Mr. Upendra Tripathy, Director General of the International Solar Alliance, Mr. Anand Kumar, Secretary, Ministry of Non-Renewable Energy, Mr. Ashok Chawla, Chairman of TERI. First and foremost, my finest compliments to an outstanding start hosted by TERI this morning, wherein our Honorable Prime Minister inaugurated this conference with a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm, and with a lot of specificity on India's role in the global frameworks, as well as some of the very specific programs which are being championed in India as one of the most attractive RE destinations in the world. I'm pleased, ladies and gentlemen, to be here on this platform because I've seen it in the past, and even more so now, that this platform is highly impactful. And in a way, it constantly catalyzes strategic initiatives with governments, corporates, academia, and naturally civil society. Shri Upendra Tripathy, who I have been associated with for many, many years when he was earlier the secretary, sir, you have been a key force in orchestrating India's RE policies and its successful implementation over the last few years. And I'm very delighted that you now head one of the finest institutions in the making, and that too very recently, the ISA, which also the Honorable Prime Minister spoke rather fondly this morning. The formation itself of ISA, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, was a gigantic task. And this intergovernmental initiative set forth by our Honorable Prime Minister and President Macron of France is now playing a very crucial role in the overall development and evolution of the solar movement across the globe. And I was very pleased to hear the PM this morning say that next only to the COP21, which was signed up, as we all know, in December 2015 in fairly difficult physical circumstances, that ISA now is only second in terms of global significance to the Paris COP21. We also know that the UN Conference 2015 was a watershed moment for RE in many, many ways. It naturally reinforced the need for rapid global transition, for cleaner energy, created a blueprint in preventing any catastrophic and devastating climate change, which was a very big fear till a few years ago. And I must say that there is a lot of belief since this COP21 was signed up that there is a safety net somewhere in the system looking at these issues intelligently. As you also know, that RE has become central today, and challenges have shifted from identifying what needs to be done in terms of what should be done, which is not only high-level strategy, but very measurable action steps and outcomes to decide the implementation objectives of renewable energy. PM Modi's vision, which is being energized and actualized by his team significantly in MNRE as well as in ISA, has indeed ensured India's time under the sun, and the overall tailwinds of change that are blowing in the right direction are helping in terms of achievement of some of these objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, if there was a world clean energy map, India, and maybe New Delhi, not necessarily, would be its capital, with this very impressive growth story, having doubled its RE capacity in the last 5 years. In fact, India stands now second on the Renewable Energy Country Attractiveness Index, which was released by Ernst & Young only last year, and is amongst the global top 10 countries with a commissioned capacity now of almost 65 megawatts, including the more recent 6 gigawatts, I'm sorry, not megawatts, 65 gigawatts, out of which the 16 gigawatts have been commissioned in the last 2.5 to 3 years, vis-a-vis the goal of 175 gigawatts, out of which solar alone, as was stated in the morning, is about 100 gigawatts. Ladies and gentlemen, as we also know, solar energy has become a lot more affordable in India. When it started, there were tariffs at levels of 15 to 20 rupees, and now we are seeing tariffs which have come down quite sharply to levels of around 2.5 to 3 rupees in some of the states. So overall, the tariff reduction in itself has been very, very meaningful. So you can see there is a stratospheric shift which has taken place. So the overall reduction is 75 to 80% in the overall tariffs in some of the states. And this is predominantly, to a large extent, because of the plug and play model introduced vis-a-vis the private solar parks that have been set up in various states. Also, one of the key reasons for this clean energy, let's say, boom of sorts, has been somewhat differentiated financial products which have been engineered over the last 2.5 to 3 years. And it's a matter of professional and national pride for me as a representative of Yes Bank in sharing with you and I remember quite distinctly, it was Valentine's Day, Sunday, 14th of Feb, so just about 3 years ago in 2015, when the minister in charge at that time, Mr. Piyush Goyal, and I launched the first green local currency bond in India. It was actually not a very large issue. When you think of it, it was only 500 crores. But by the time we closed that issue, within 5 days, we had an overall book position of 10 billion rupees, so 1,000 crores. But that in itself was a game changer. It built the mindset, and now that is resulting in more and more market share for green energy in India. And this was done at Reinvest 2015, so not very long ago. As we also know that since then, Yes Bank also did 2 more green bond issuances. One of them is particularly important because that was done jointly with IFC Washington in London, and that was the first green masala bond to be listed on LSE, and that happened, I remember, 3rd week of August the same year in 2015. So the third point I would like to share with you, and Mr. Tripathy asked me this question as we met after a few months. He says, what happened to your commitment of 5 gigawatts of financing? So I like to proudly share with you that our bank, which made a green commitment of financing 5 gigawatts on that particular day, 14th of Feb, 2015, sir, we are today accountable, and we have financed 4.3 gigawatts of that 5 gigawatts commitment. Having said this, Mr. Tripathi's comment was, why don't you increase it to 10 gigawatts? So thanks for the encouragement, sir. One of the other things I would like to really mention is that while the takeoff of the RE sector has happened, has been catalyzed rather well over the last 2.5, 3 years, but the untapped opportunity between now and just 2022, because if we have to get to even 175 gigawatts, even like 100 gigawatts, is estimated at $450 billion of investment. And with India proving to be the second most attractive destination, you can well imagine the FDI and the opportunities for bank financing as well as for qualifying for carbon credits is tremendous in our own country. And therefore, I'd also take the opportunity on this platform to make 3 recommendations, because it's important that the intelligentsia here support some of the ideas which are critical to the financing of these projects. Because as you know, typically in projects of this type, the debt equity ratio is 3:1. That's the thumb rule. So I would like to believe that the first important point is that there should be further easing of regulatory measures to increase and enhance the pace of financing required for the RE sector in the country. And with that, I like to believe that a baby step was taken in this direction, in so much as very small projects were qualified for priority sector lending, which is a statutory obligation for the banking sector in India, as most of the Indians here know. And for a foreign guest, we typically have to commit about 40% of our exposure to priority sector sub-segments, and therefore parts of solar energy, renewable energy is also a part of this obligation. But 15 crore, which is just about $2.2 million, is really small. And I would request the leadership in this room, as they meet decision makers, to consider a threshold, like they've done more recently for the micro, small, medium enterprises, by defining them with turnover. So 5 crores and 75 crores and 250 crores. Similarly, I would like to believe the priority sector lending criteria should be defined with maybe 10 megawatts as a minimum, for small projects, and maybe for medium projects a slightly higher cap of anywhere between 25 and 50 megawatts. And I think this will help more prudential lending, safer lending, and will protect our banks to also meet the energy security requirements of our country. So this is my first recommendation. I also like to believe that the tenor for renewable energy bonds is so far averaging only 5 to 7 years because the depth in the market restricts you from going beyond the tenor. So the view is that possibly we should be looking at matching the bond tenor with the financing, lifeline of these projects, which is typically 15 to 20 years. And the market today has reasonable depth to underwrite, and take the credit risk and maybe even sell down the credit risk and even invite international investors, FIIs registered in India under the overall debt limit, to subscribe to these longer tenure bonds, which can be very, very attractive, particularly if the currency is stable. So this is like a subset of, a recommendation for the regulatory easing, which is warranted. Similarly, moving away from the lending side to the capital market side, at least I like to believe that there have been roughly about $6.4 billion of issuances in the local market in the last 3 years. And 68% of that has been in the form of green bonds, so 27 issuances in all. However, the next level of innovation, because this is at a wholesale level, this is at a very high level, right? So next level of innovation is required through aggregation and securitization of projects, so that we are not financing one project at a time, that we take and build more granularity and amalgamate projects, bundle, what we call in our language sometimes. So bundling of projects, securitizing the projects, and then selling them down to not only corporate institutions, but even to HNI and retail investors. And this is something which is not uncommon, particularly in Europe, and this is a very desirable CSR kind of investment, which is fairly important in the more developed world. I also like to believe that bank-ready off-grid enterprises. So banks need to create this specialization as good money doctors to be able to handhold project management of some of these projects that qualify for priority sector lending, and make sure that these are planned well, so that the pooling of finance required for such projects can be done from day one, rather than leave it for the projects to complete, and therefore the completion risk becomes high. So the important thing is to handhold the projects to completion and then aggregate the smaller projects and put them into this priority sector lending equivalent basket. So that would be, I think, an important innovation for us to work towards. And the third one is more about retail participation, because I like the rooftop segment. We have, I think that is by and large one of the most attractive opportunities in our country. And this has witnessed 80% growth in calendar year 2017. But a lot of this is today on account of more the commercial and the industrial segment. So just about 20% is non-commercial industrial, but the opportunity therefore for rent a rooftop sort of a model is being piloted in certain urban areas. And I understand, sir, Mr. Anand Kumar, sir, that the government is drafting policies to facilitate this rent a rooftop, from what I gather, and I'm sure this is going to be forthcoming fairly soon. I also recognize that DISCOMs are being designated as SPOCs to increase the adoption in the residential market. And this is being done through the Sustainable Rooftop Implementation for Solar Transfiguration of India, what is called the Shrishti scheme. And I think the PM alluded to that this morning as well. However, in order to boost the underlying demand, reforms such as net metering and income tax credits, rebates for capex, similar to the solar investment tax credit in the US, would also help incentivize investments. So we like to work with your ministry, sir, on this front as well. Overall, ladies and gentlemen, I congratulate TERI and its exemplary leadership, the support of ISA in bringing this program in an enhanced way back to India. My heartiest congratulations, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Very good. Without further ado, I want to thank Mr. Kapoor for a thought-provoking address on financing, on the opportunities that are coming up, and the ways in which we could have policies which take advantage of those opportunities. I now turn to Mr. Upendra Tripathy for sharing his thoughts with us, and it would be particularly great if you focus on the ISA opportunities.
And how it is in demand, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Same time as he took? Okay, no. Friends, Anand, my colleague with the secretary, and also a lot of credit for ISA goes to him because he's the chairman of the International Steering Committee, open to all countries, and he's the one, along with France, who steer how ISA moves in future. And of course, Mr. Kapoor, first I got his attention when I was secretary MNRE. We're talking about financial instruments because, when we met the Honorable Prime Minister those days in 2015, we told we are going to sign MOUs. He said, nothing new in this, MOUs are being signed for decades. So we said, no, but we will take written commitments signed by the managing director of the company, like Tata's, Reliance, and all that. He said, that is okay. And well, we got quite a bit, And then he said that, fine, these MOUs are fine. Now it is signed by the CEO of the company. It gives a lot of credibility. But where is the money? So we came back hurrying, and we sat together, broke our heads. And those days he well advised us that if we can call a meeting of the CEOs, and lo and behold, with help of no multilateral banks, no foreign banks, the Indian banks alone and the private institutions like L&T Finance and all that put together $77,000 million of promise. And not that they won't realize, in fact, if all of them, they come together today and they say, okay, we would like to put solar, we will really find a problem because the market is not ready to take so much of solar now. Of course, thanks to MNRE, they are going in a large scale. The Honorable Minister currently says he will exceed 100,000 megawatt, and that is it brought solar into the forefront, India into the forefront. I was told that I am supposed to sell how ISA is generating demand, in the ISA countries. I can be a little textbookish. I can say that we have 5 programs, and we generate demand through that. Program number 1 is about farmers, a lot of them in the world, and both India and France are particular that if farmers can get the benefit of solar pumps. And true, in the morning I met the Principal Secretary of Energy from Andhra Pradesh, and he was telling that in their state they are coming up with many innovative schemes. And one such scheme I am told is that the farmers usually wait very long time for getting the electricity connection to the pumps, more than almost a year or 2. And number 2, in an average, to give electricity connection to the pump of a farmer, you have to put 5 poles, electric poles, and each pole costs around 50,000 rupees, 2.5 lakhs there. And then, of course, they have a special subsidy rate for the farmers. Given the economic condition of the farmer, the electricity tariff per month is very low. And if they take the net present value of all the future subsidies they give, that is a substantial amount. So apparently they have decided that you give a free solar pump to the farmer and disconnect them from the grid so that they get reliable power from sunrise to sunset. But the point is, it is not only in India that we have millions and millions, I am told 7.5 or 8 millions of diesel pumps. In ISA countries, we are trying to do a census of how many diesel pumps are there. And whether some such innovative scheme can be taken across states where things can be done, where actually the farmer can get energy, and it is a win-win situation for all. The second it is not merely 500,000 pumps. We are trying to aggregate demand, risk, and resources, going for a global tender. For example, in this question we asked Bangladesh, do you need some solar pumps? They said we need 50,000 rupees per year, 50,000 pump sets per year. India was great enough saying that we need 100,000 for next 3 years, each year 100,000. Now, of course, the need is much more. Mauritius, Uganda, we are putting countries together and prodding them to say that whether they can make a commitment of solar pumps, put together 500,000 solar pumps, we mobilize, and then we go for a global tender presuming that somewhere the prices will come down. Of course, this is something, experimentation going on. We are in touch with the industry, and we usually consult them in each program, because for ISA, the CEOs are very important. We think industry is the best stakeholder who can actually bring changes in the field, provided the ecosystem that ISA helps to create through collective leadership of the ministers from the 121 prospective member countries. The second program that we have to create demand is, of course, about money, and money is very important. The Paris Declaration that started ISA, it says that we should mobilize, $1,000 billion by 2030. And when the negotiations were going on, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, they said that, look, $1,000 billion by 2030 is not enough. And whereas other countries, some countries said, okay, it's okay, I think that's the money we need. So as a compromise, a particular word was put in the treaty and in the Paris Declaration, and there was more than. So nobody today knows how much more than $1,000 billion you need by 2030. But if you look at the figures, $150 billion that came in 2016, and presuming that this trend continues, you will need or you will have much more money than what actually were projecting or projected in the Paris Declaration. But well, if you look at again a textbook presentation, it talks about trillions of dollars. The world economy, $78 trillion, and if you look at pension funds, insurance funds, it's all in $1 trillion. But if you ask a project developer, they would always say either the interest rate is very high, hedging cost is high, or the bank finds the project is not very risk-free. Now, what ISA is doing about this? One, in May 2016, we constituted a task force in Paris with the help of CEW, CII, TCX, and under the chairmanship of TERI initiative. World Bank also participated initially, and now they are actually taking a lead on that, to find out some mechanism for risk mitigation. The idea was, if we can mobilize $1 billion, I'm told 5 to 10 times that money will flow into this sector from the corporate sector. You can leverage that guarantee mechanisms to get in more money into the sector. We are trying to get Green Climate Fund fully involved in this, and so one of the main focus areas of ISA is to create some such common risk mitigation mechanisms so that more and more money flows into this sector. Not only for the on-grid sector, not only for solar parks and such structures, but also for the poor man's, the mini grids, the rooftops, and the other things that we need in this sector. And apart from this, of course, we are planning on 11th of March, when the solar summit is there. The heads of the states, heads of the governments from some 52 countries will be coming under the leadership of India and France. During that also, we plan to launch a few more things, 2 more programs, one on e-solar mobility. It is more about solar ferries, solar planes, solar rickshaws, and storage, and as well as the solar rooftop. So the idea is, we are trying to get into more and more programs, more into more countries, trying to aggregate demand through a consultative process of resources, of risks, and of course demand. How do you actually do it without a support mechanism, an ecosystem? And that ecosystem, ISA is trying to create something called Star C. It's not actually a star and you see the star, it is Star C, Solar Applications Technology Research Center. We have got a bit of help from World Bank, from EU, from NREL, and this is trying to believe that many ministers in many countries believe that unless the quality of solar products are good, you are not going to go and make much headway. And that is true. If you put a solar street light, doesn't work after 2 years, you get a bad name. If you put a solar pump, there are no repair facility, that also creates a bad this thing. If you have a lot of appliances and there are no servicing, that also gives you a bad name. For that, Star C, the center located here, it will create 10 centers of global excellence, one in India, in France, in Australia, and these centers in turn will network the R&D facilities, the innovation, the capacity building, the quality control, the standard setting. These are the ecosystems that these centers will try to build up, because ISA believes that the CEOs will never agree to take the risks that we expect them to take. Actually, we say that let us come together to make the sun brighter, This will never happen unless the industry understands that there is financial backup, there is an ecosystem, there is an enabling policy regime, as well as there is something called quality control, testing, capacity building. And so ISA doesn't look at a program per se. It brings together a cluster of programs over 121 countries with the hope that in future the partner countries also join in the programs, the countries beyond the topics. And this is how we actually move forward. So the central theme of ISA, apart from the members, the ministers, the policy makers, one of the central themes is the corporate sector. If we look at the treaty, in many places it mentions about the corporate sector, about the industry, because they are the ones who actually we have to work with closely, because they are the ones who can actually bring a lot of changes in the field. To conclude, I'll just tell two small anecdotes. Usually I do a lot, but today I've been really not many I have used. One is about one of my professors told me about the story of the Indian tea. I'm told at some point Indians didn't have much of tea, or they were not taking or sipping much of tea. And the British merchants, those used to have horses, they used to take tea packets free of cost, used to dump it in the villages on the doorsteps with a small sheet saying that how to make tea out of this. And you now look tea, every time, everywhere it is tea. And well, can we make solar tea? I mean, can we make solar tea, this type of tea that people use more and more solar? And that, of course, is only a lesson that you can do. And the second thing, I met a gentleman from Bangladesh yesterday, and he was telling the story, how they created demand out of nothing. And he gave me the example of the mobile. He said mobile always has been something very stimulating, because we have created a service, a product, and a demand out of nothing. It is a spectrum that we use for talking. His idea, and they have implemented in Bangladesh, I'm told, is that why the farmer has to always own the pump for irrigation? Why it has to be in his or her field? So they reversed the idea. They said, look, let us not give the pump to the farmer. Let us give the pump to an entrepreneur. Suppose I'm an entrepreneur. I take a pump from the company, from the bank. I put in the middle of the land that I somehow managed to operate the pump, and I don't sell the water only to one farmer. I sell the water to a number of farmers around, and I charge them depending on what crops they grow. I asked him how many pumps you are operating. He says they have a prospect of 1 million pumps, because it is essentially creating 1 million entrepreneurs. Any person who can get a loan from the bank, and there is no issue of maintenance of the pump, because this gentleman, as an entrepreneur, he can well maintain the pump. He sells water, he gets back the money. I think that is also a lesson for ISA. Can we take these best practices from across the border? Can we get this from Bangladesh into India? Can we take the Indian best practices outside India? Can we get best practices from Africa? And that is where we are creating the Infopedia. It is a cyber platform with 3 chambers. Chamber 1, where the 121 ministers, 121 policymakers, 121 industry people from 121 countries can talk to each other. The second chamber is about the best practice videos, some 1,000 videos on various applications of solar, where people can see, where policymakers can see. And the third one is a country profile. For each country, we give a dedicated space where they can actually enter and write and tell how the CEOs can move into their countries for promoting investment. Well, let me say, ISA is still evolving. Although we are actually, started 2 years back. 1 year back, it was open for signature. On 6th of December, it came into force. We are still to get the host country agreement signed, because that is when actually we become a legal body who can issue tenders, who can sign contracts. And I'm very happy to say that in the process, the 52 countries who have come forward and the 22 countries who have become founding members of ISA is a great tribute to the fast process through which India and France jointly championed this, and all the countries came to help us. I'm sure with the help of CEOs, we are going to bring in the so-called solar revolution, bring in so-called $1,000 billion of investment, And the chairman of our steering committee has said that 1,000 billion should be additional, and that is where the challenge lies. And that is where we have to have help from not only financial institutions, but from every stakeholder. But together, I'm sure we can make the sun a lot brighter. And in a few years, maybe half a decade, all these 1.2 billion people without access to energy and 2.4 billion people without access to clean fuel can go out of the statistical pages to oblivion. And we can say once the world had 2.6 billion people without access to clean energy, and it is not there today. And I think that is something the 21st century can be very proud of. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tripathy. We have Mr. Anand Kumar with us, and I will now request him to deliver his address at this conclave. Mr. Anand Kumar.
My dear friend, Mr. Ajay Mathur, my senior colleague, Shri Upendra Tripathy, James Bond of the financial industry, Mr. Rana Kapoor. Whenever I meet him, I call him. You must have heard about this James Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun. And he's the man with the golden hands. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On the sidelines of COP21 in 2015, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji made a commitment to the world to reduce the carbon emission intensity of Indian economy by 1/3 by the year 2030. And in the same year, he set a new target for meeting the first objective of 175 gigawatt capacity of renewables by 2022. By 2015, we were talking about a very limited goal of RE capacity of 20 gigawatt. But then in 2015, from 20 gigawatt, we started talking about 175 gigawatt, a quantum jump. At that time, everybody thought that it would be an impossible target to achieve. Globally, there has been surge in renewables. There was an addition of 165 gigawatt in 2016, which accounted for around 60% of the capacity addition then. There was an addition of 74 gigawatt in the solar capacity, addition of another 50% there. But if we see the Indian scenario, we are today one of the largest markets in the renewables. Of 175 gigawatt of renewable capacity addition, 100 has to come from solar, 60 has to come from wind, 10 from biomass and 5 from hydropower. As against 5 of hydropower, we have already achieved 4.5, not very difficult. In biomass, we have already achieved a figure of 8.5 gigawatt. Again, it's easy, within reach. In wind, we are at a figure of around 33 gigawatt as against the target of 60 gigawatt. Again, we would be there. In solar, as against the capacity of, targeted capacity of 100 gigawatt, we would be achieving around 22 gigawatt by 31/3/2018. We still have a long way to go. And if we analyze the target set for ourselves, till 31/3/2018, we have done fairly well on ground mounted. But we have done poorly when we talk about rooftop sector. And we are very conscious of it. And we are now trying to modify our schemes, bring in new set of programs to achieve 40 gigawatt of rooftop solar by the year 2022. As we speak, as I speak now today, we have already established a capacity of 62.5 gigawatt in renewables. By 31/3, this figure would go up to 68 gigawatt. In the solar sector, as I said earlier, we are achieving a capacity of 22 gigawatt by 2018. This means March, 31st March 2018. But what is more important is that during the year 2017-2018, we would be bidding out a capacity of 20 gigawatt. So 22 gigawatt plus 20 gigawatt. In 18-19, we would be bidding out an additional capacity of 30 gigawatt, and the same would be done in 19-20. In the wind sector, this year we would have bid out a capacity of 9.5 gigawatt. Next year we will be doing another 10 gigawatt, and then 19-20 another 10 gigawatt. We have worked backwards from the target of 175, which we are set to achieve by March 2022. You all know that generally a wind project or solar project would take around 18 months to establish. But we are given an additional 6 months. God forbid something arises which we have not preconceived. So we would finish all our bidding of 175 gigawatt by 31/3/2020, giving clear 2 years for achieving the target of 175 set by our Honorable Prime Minister. When we talk about this 175 gigawatt, when we talk about the surge in renewables, the aim, one, as I said earlier, remains to reduce the carbon intensity of the economy. Number two, which is equally important, is to provide universal energy access to the citizens of the world. And the third important point is to provide that universal energy access at affordable rates. You can provide energy, but if they are not affordable, it's of no use. With 1.25 billion people, we have a very strong economy. For last 3 years, as the Honorable Finance Minister said, that we are growing at 7.5%. And whatever happens in India affects the world. And today, precisely for that reason, we are becoming one of the most lucrative markets for the renewables. We were buying solar power at the rate of around 17 rupees, around 2010. But today, if you see, the same power tariff has come down to 2.44. And it's not happening only in the solar sector, but it's happening also in the wind sector. We concluded our latest auction for the wind of 2,000 megawatt day for yesterday, and consecutively for the second auction we have got the we got the rate of 2.44. So the renewables are becoming affordable. And why they are becoming affordable? One, the technology is improving, the efficiency of harnessing the renewable resources is increasing, and we are enhancing the economy of scale. Earlier we used to talk about few megawatts, then few gigawatts. But now we are talking about the 10 gigawatts, 20 gigawatts. And towards this aim, we have floated an expression of interest, which is now linked with manufacturing, of bringing in developers for setting up parks for 20 gigawatt in the solar sector over the next 3 years. And besides this 20 gigawatt of expression of interest, we have also invited expression of interest for setting up the floating solar in the dams of India of the tune of around 10 gigawatt. So we are enhancing the economy of scale to get the lower tariff. Towards the technology, we have got an National Institute of Solar Energy. We are developing collaborations with other institutions in the US, in the other parts of the developed world. And now we are trying to set up different teams which would do research towards efficiency, looking at the new materials which can be used for the solar cells, which can be, and also which can crack the puzzle of storage. So technology upgradation and research in technology is going to be utmost importance, where today India should focus, and we in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy are focusing on that particular aspect very, very seriously. Having talked about the target, having talked about that why renewables are important for the world at large, having talked about technology and efficiency, we still have a problem about sustaining our renewable sector per se. The reason being that we do not manufacture polysilicon ingots, we do not manufacture wafers, and we depend on the wafers from the other countries to come in here, and then we assemble the cells and the modules. Today our capacity for modules is around 8 gigawatt. but out of 8 gigawatt, only around 6 gigawatt is functional. In solar cells, it is still lesser. It's 3 gigawatt installed capacity, and what we use maybe around 2.5 gigawatt. So we have to somehow bring and catalyze manufacturing in India. Today, around 88 to 90% of the cells and modules come from abroad to support our solar program. All right, I'll quickly close. So we are now looking into the manufacturing very seriously, and that's how our program of 20 gigawatt capacity is coming up, and that will be linked to the manufacturing. And sorry, the whole flow has gone. All right. So manufacturing, we are looking into it. And as far as the financing is concerned, yes, financing is very important. Indian's renewable sector is being financed largely by the private sector. And if in case we have to meet additional 100 gigawatt, we would be requiring an additional investment of around 120 billion US dollars. And definitely the government cannot provide that 125 billion dollars. So we have to look towards the private sector, towards the private investment, towards the multilateral development banks, and also towards the innovative way of financing. And as Mr. Rana Kapoor was saying, that we should move towards that. And I'm happy to inform you that in the ministry, through IRDA, we raised masala bonds worth 300 million US dollars this year, and we will continue to do so in future also for supporting the sector. So we are not in the ministry looking after only the grid sector, but we are also focusing on the off-grid sector. And we are going to, we are now bringing out a new scheme called Kusum, which will focus on de-dieselization of the farm sector, for empowerment of the farmers, for giving the new, for additional income to the farmers. We are bringing out a scheme called Srishti for catalyzing, galvanizing the rooftop installations for meeting our target of 40,000 megawatt. And I wouldn't like to go into the detail on the other aspects of it. Since the Honorable Minister has already arrived, I'll conclude here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anand Kumar, and I apologize for breaking your thought in the middle, but thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to invite onto the dais the Honourable Minister for Civil Aviation of the Government of India, Mr. Jayant Sinha. And I believe, sir, that you have kindly agreed to release a report which TERI have produced, which is hugely germane to this subject we've been discussing. It's a report on the electric mobility paradigm shift, capturing the opportunities. Dr. Mathur, I believe you're going to introduce the Minister.
Well, it's... Ladies and gentlemen, it's a proud privilege to welcome Mr. Jayant Sinha back to TERI. I would think that, this is the third time you're at the summit or the fourth time. But the point remains that the kind of dynamism that he has brought into the government, the changes that he has effected greatly influence the sustainable development agenda. In his previous life as a banker and in his current life as a minister in the government, one of the things that we have always admired about him is his willingness to look to the future and ability to effect change. With a great pleasure, I would request him to share his thoughts today with us. I know that you have to leave soon. I apologize that we are running slightly late, but we look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Ajay. Colleagues, dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media. As Ajay was saying, I have been fortunate enough to come and speak at the World Sustainable Development Summit for the last, I think now this is my third time. So I'm very fortunate to have had a chance to speak at these summits. And there are many reasons for doing so where I like to come back and speak about it. One, because of course I myself am a very strong believer in sustainable development and promoting it and encouraging it in every way possible. When I was in the finance ministry, we could do that through financing, and now that I'm in aviation, there are many ways in which we are promoting sustainable development through our airports and through air connectivity. The second reason is that the kind of people who are here, the kind of ideas that you're working on are extraordinarily stimulating for me personally, intellectually very engaging, and it's always wonderful to see the work that's being done, to hear the kind of speeches that are given. So I personally find it very engaging to be here. And then the third reason, of course, is that you attract at the Development Summit some of the leaders in sustainable development, and it is a great way to collaborate. It's a great way to forge new connections and to push forward initiatives. And every year you have surpassed your objectives and your goals for these sustainable development summits. I think this time with the Honorable Prime Minister inaugurating it, again you have really got it going in a spectacular way. And I want to compliment and congratulate you for the excellent work that you all are doing at TERI, and for all of the collaborators and participants who come and discuss these sustainable development topics. So I really want to congratulate you and compliment you for the wonderful work that you all are doing. Now, today's discussion, and I was listening with great interest to what the Secretary was saying in terms of renewable energy and where we are right now. Today's discussion and this conference on the solar revolution, I think is particularly timely. Particularly timely. I've been reading Tom Friedman's book recently, and he was in India, and I had a chance to talk to him as well. And in his very memorable and quite outstanding way, he has termed the age that we are living in as the age of accelerations. He's called this particular time period, the last 10 or 15 years, as the age of accelerations. And in fact, if we look at sustainable development, and if we look at some of the topics we are discussing right now, they exemplify this notion of acceleration. Why is that? And why is it the age of accelerations? Because I think as far as the solar revolution is concerned, we have three drivers that are operating at warp speed right now. They're operating at warp speed right now. And those of us who are engineers, systems thinkers, know that there are virtuous cycles that get created, reinforcing positive feedback loops that get created. And when that momentum, that acceleration starts to build, then it starts to become self-reinforcing. But when you have 2 or 3 self-reinforcing positive feedback loops working together, not only is the system self-reinforcing, it's mutually reinforcing as well. the system becomes mutually reinforcing. And what's happening with the solar revolution, I think, is becoming mutually reinforcing. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think there are three major positive feedback loops that are starting to work as far as solar is concerned. First, of course, as you know well, and which the Secretary was just discussing, is solar technology, solar energy itself, and the price of solar. The price of solar is now down to, what was the last bid? 2.4. Renewable was, wind was also at 2.4. So renewable at 2.4, I mean, it is unbelievable and unimaginable that we could be at solar when it is now cheaper than base load coal. I come from a coal producing area in Jharkhand, Hazaribagh. I was just actually in the coal mines yesterday. And we have a lot of challenges in coal mining, and a lot of people are displaced, and it's very difficult for us to go through the coal mining process. But I told them, I said, if we don't get the coal out of the ground now over the next 10 or 15 years, we'll never get the coal out of the ground. And that's kind of the moment, the tipping point that we are at right now, which is we've crossed over. For a long time, there was this question of grid parity when it came to renewables. When are we going to cross that line? But not only have we crossed the line, ladies and gentlemen, it is accelerating from there on. When we were talking about 5, 6, 8, 9 rupees per unit, to now be down to 244, as I said, is almost inconceivable. And the speed at which it has come down has been absolutely dramatic. And that's the power of technology. So that's the first thing that's happening, which is that solar technology, the cost of solar, the way it's scaling up, the 175 gigawatt target, the International Solar Alliance, all of this is moving this technology very, very quickly, and that's the first thing that's happening. The second incredible driver that's going on right now is obviously the Internet of Things, and associated with that, artificial intelligence and machine learning. What that's doing is that it's enabling us to put in place distributed power systems, manage them at tolerances and under control parameters that would be unimaginable and at costs that would be inconceivable even 4 or 5 or 10 years ago. And again, that's of course, as you know well, because of the deep learning algorithms that we have right now, what's happening in terms of processing power, speed, bandwidth, all of those things that are also accelerating very quickly. So when you add that Internet of Things, when you get that kind of control, when you get that ability to put in place these distributed energy systems, it becomes extraordinary as to what is possible. And I will come to what is possible in just a little while. But that's the second major driver, the kind of control paradigm that we have operating on these distributed energy systems. And by the way, we just had this report that we've issued on electric mobility. These are distributed energy systems. A motorcycle, a car, a drone is a distributed energy system. And the ability to control it and maneuver it and manage it is becoming extraordinary right now. So that's the second driver, the kind of control paradigm, Internet of Things, the kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence that we can put into play. The third area that's moving at warp speed is battery technology. We know what the economics of lithium ion are right now. And the kind of durability, safety, and price that lithium ion is giving you today, and this is just the beginnings of what is happening in battery technology. If you look at what's happening in polymers, if you look at the material science, if you look at the kind of research that's going on in battery technology right now, it's extraordinary. And that, coupled with, again, the control as well as the cost of solar, is starting to really unleash a genuine revolution in energy systems. I mean, Ajay, am I right? Is that what's happening? So this is giving us an opportunity to rethink energy systems, rethink control, rethink delivery of a lot of different automation in a way that we could not even conceive earlier. And that is starting to pervade into not just one, but virtually all sectors of the economy. And I'll illustrate that, virtually all sectors of the economy. So when you think of solar, at some level you're probably thinking of solar in terms of wholesale generation of power. Big solar grids operating in the desert somewhere, generating gigawatts of energy, being pumped into the grid and moving on from there. But that's only one part of the solar revolution. The other part of the solar revolution that you need to think about is what it's doing in terms of distributed energy as well. that too is very transformational. And in some ways, the paradigm shift that's going to happen through distributed solar is even more important than what's happening with wholesale solar. Wholesale solar is fitting into the grid and in a way is just plug and play into the existing grid and existing power systems architecture. But what distributed energy coupled with Internet of Things, coupled with battery technology, coupled with panels on virtually any surface you can find is going to start us and enable us to do things that we would not even have dreamt of, and that's where the transformational aspect is going to come in. I'll give you some examples and then I'll speak briefly about what it means from a business point of view. Of course, you know, the growth of wholesale solar going into the grid and so on is happening very, very quickly. But what is also beginning to happen is that we are seeing distributed energy systems, solar power coming into areas like obviously mobility, not just for cars but for motorcycles. India produces 18 million two-wheelers a year. We are the world's largest manufacturers of two-wheelers, 18 million two-wheelers a year. We have an ability to transform the entire two-wheeler ecosystem by using distributed energy with solar panels or even coming off the grid. So we have an ability with all of this to, and with solar, with battery technology to completely transform the two-wheeler ecosystem. Of course, we have the ability to do that for electric vehicles as well. And of course, as you know, the Secretary just mentioned, you can definitely use this to get to universal access and to get to remote villages, remote areas where it's difficult to send the grid. So those applications are absolutely there. But there is an application you probably have not yet thought about, but which I'm doing a lot of work on, which is drone technology. And as we do more work in drones, the more and more amazing applications that we are finding with drones as well. Whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in health, delivery, passengers, all of these different applications on drones are becoming more and more real. And the beauty of this kind of distributed energy is the same kind of batteries, the same kind of electric motors, the same kind of componentry in software and in electronics that you're using for motorcycles, you're using for electric vehicles, that you're using for distributed energy on home and rooftops can actually be used to power drones as well. If you're charging a motorcycle, surely you can charge a drone as well. It's the same technology. And these are the kinds of commonalities, these are the kinds of systems and manufacturing and design capabilities that are now beginning to be possible when you look at all these different sectors that are being transformed by these distributed energy systems, by these major transformations that are happening in technology, in software, and in energy. So with drone technologies, you can couple a lot of the same components, a lot of the same underlying capabilities that you have in other sectors and apply it to drones as well. So we are seeing these technologies, these capabilities evolving quickly. We are seeing them pervade and go into many of these different sectors: two-wheelers, electric vehicles, rooftops, drones. All of this is now starting to emerge in front of our eyes, and as I said, it's an age of accelerations, so it's moving very, very quickly. And by the way, this is not science fiction. When I talk about drones and what is possible, passenger drones and so on, or electric two-wheelers, it's all up on YouTube. Just put it up on YouTube and start seeing what are the kinds of applications, technologies, prototypes people are working with right now. It's really happening at a very, very fast pace, which is why it's so exciting. Now, what does that mean for business? How does business start to grapple with this and think about this? I think the first important thing we have to understand, and I think this is a challenge for Rana and people in the financial world, is that you have to make very big bets. And this is where somebody like a Tesla or others that are betting big on battery, massive scale factories, gig factories and so on are really going out ahead. We have to build entire ecosystems. And because we are building entire ecosystems for charging of motorcycles, for building drones, for getting rooftops and so on, unless we are willing to write really big multi-$100 million investment checks in these kinds of ecosystems, we will not be able to take full advantage of this technology. And that's a very complicated question to deal with, which is who is there with the risk appetite to take these very big bets that are required to unlock these big ecosystems? So that is one very important question we have to think about. How do we do that? How do we get people to step up and make these big bets? And again, the countries that are being successful, the ecosystems that are taking off, is where 1 or 2 or 3 people, whether it is through government efforts or through the private sector, whether it's Elon Musk with Tesla, the Chinese in terms of some of the big bets they're taking, those are the countries that are able to really start building these ecosystems, and then it becomes very difficult as size economies kick in for us to then compete, which we are already seeing in some sectors. So making big bets is very, very crucial, and that is a big challenge for us. The second major thing that we have to think about, and we are struggling with this as far as drones are concerned, or we are working on it as far as drones are concerned, is really resolving a number of important interconnected technology and regulatory standards. How do you create an operating framework for drones which balances security, safety, affordability, and at the same time encourages industry to grow? So what do we do as far as technology standards are concerned so that there is interoperability and control at a certain level? What do we do as far as regulations are concerned so that we maintain proper oversight? Developing that framework of technology standards and regulations also requires a lot of interaction with industry, working with global leaders, and at the same time fine-tuning them as we go along. So it's a very dynamic, iterative process, and that from a governance point of view is a big challenge in terms of establishing the framework. So that is the second thing that we have to deal with, and where we need a lot of support and work from businesses. Businesses have to be active shapers, active partners in establishing these kinds of overall market frameworks for these ecosystems to develop. So that's the second major issue that we have to consider and think about. The third area that is also, I think, important for us to reflect on is the type of collaboration that is necessary. Now, in the tech industry for a long time, we've talked about the nature of co-opetition, where you compete and collaborate at the same time. You compete and collaborate at the same time. So again, coming back to drones, we have to have stakeholders, we have to have players at the table that are both competing and collaborating at the same time. So this cooperation plus competition, co-opetition paradigm is something that firms have to learn how to do well. They have to understand where are the areas that they can cooperate on, where are the areas that they need to compete on, and we have to collectively work together to establish those frameworks that balance cooperation between firms with competition between firms. So these are the real challenges that we face even as we try and take advantage of the solar revolution. As I said, the technology is moving at warp speed, the potential is moving at warp speed. It's coming into many different sectors, it's pervading these sectors, and now the challenge in front of us is A, make those big bets, develop those ecosystems, B, establish the appropriate technology and regulatory frameworks for markets to get jump-started, for markets to develop, and number 3, to ensure appropriate conduct between competitors and so that they cooperate and compete in appropriate ways. That really is what we need to really encourage. That is what we need to support. And again, as I said at the outset, these kinds of conferences, these kinds of collaborations where thought leaders, industry leaders, policymakers get a chance to get together, discuss these kinds of issues that we need to work on, I think are absolutely invaluable. Again, as I said, it's the age of accelerations. The solar revolution is at hand. It's really going to be transformational for our societies. It's absolutely essential for us from a sustainable development point of view. And I very much hope that all of you working together will come up with very innovative ideas and solutions for us to work on in government. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks ever so much. Let me, on behalf of all of us, thank the Minister for an extremely thought-provoking speech. I must confess, I had never thought of drones in that way. But the ability to build drones into the larger context of what we are talking here, again, many thanks. And I'm very sure that this provides stimulus for a lot of new discussion. So may I, on behalf of all of us, again, thank you. And, you know, you can count that you will be here the next time and the time after that. You've just got yourself into this. Thank you very much.